town hall meetings and get down to getting things done. Because Congress isn't going to do it, so we're the only ones that are going to do it. So, and that's why this meeting has been called, I was going to be running for the Central Committee, and not enough people signed up, and I thought, you know, the difference got to happen if I'm going to run for Central Committee, so I was going to call a town hall meeting. And I called David and, or spoke to him over the email. I wanted to come in May, and he says, how about April? You know, town hall meetings across the nation from Democrats.com, because Congress is going to be voting on spending money. So then a couple of us talked up and down the coast, and we've got a 3-day tour going on here, which may be the beginning of many more. But David Swanson, the reason I focused on him, and it's been a while, he doesn't even know this. It was about 2003 when he was working with Dennis Kucinich, but it was actually a little bit before, and I was working to support Dennis and different things. I kept seeing David Swanson, David Swanson. And every time I'd see it, I'd say, this guy, God, he's connected to this, and he's making this happen. And he was an action-oriented person. And I'm tired of people that are just bloggers and don't do anything, but they blog, everybody's got an opinion. But David makes things happen. And so I felt like that was a person that I wanted to get to know, and I emailed him, and he gave me information about all the different medias. He didn't hold things back. He wasn't like working on his plan to be famous. He wanted to share, he wanted to change. And so here's a list, and maybe some of you already know these are the things that he's done. David is the creator of ImpeachCheney.org, the Washington director of Democrats. And this guy, okay, and of ImpeachPact.org. He's co-founder of After Downing Street Coalition. Remember, we had nothing creator of MeetWithCindy.org, a creator of ResistantMarch.org, and a board member of Progressive Democrats of America and of the Backbone Campaign, which a lot of people are really talking about, of Voters for Peace and a Filibuster for Peace. He was the organizer in 2006 of Camp Democracy. Excuse me. He serves on the steering committee of the Charlottesville Center for Peace and Justice and on a working group of United for Peace and Justice. He has worked as a newspaper reporter and as a communications director, with jobs including press secretary for Dennis Kucinich in 2004, media coordinator for the International Labor Communications Association, and 3 years as communications coordinator for ACORN, the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now. Swanson is a member of and has served on the Executive Council of Washington Baltimore Newspaper Guild. He obtained a master's degree in philosophy with the University of Virginia in 1997. His website is, check out his website if you haven't already, and that's www.davidswanson.org. And in April and May 2007, Swanson consulted part-time for Kucinich for 2008, which I saw you in New Hampshire. And he hosts a weekly radio show at the peoplespeakradio.net, which I hope you can mention it before the night's over too, so we'll know a little more about it. But I think he's going to share just so much information for all of us and to give us more enlightenment to what we need to know, but create activism. Thank you so much, David, for coming in.
Can we first of all have a round of applause for Sandra for putting this together? And after this, we're all going to go right over there and play a nice game of volleyball. I don't know if you can hear the occasional thump behind me. Working? Working?
Not quite loud enough.
We can hear you.
If I speak loudly, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So you tell me if you get it working and you want me to use it.
Okay.
Can you come up with
So when I started giving speeches about impeachment and peace 3 years ago, I used to like to list all the major impeachable offenses for Bush and for Cheney. But as the list grew, it became rather cumbersome. It got to the point where adding another crime would call to mind 4 other crimes that you had to add. And then someone would discover a whole new field of criminality and report it while I was on the airplane to the speaking event. And then if I left somebody's favorite impeachable offense on the list, there would be hell to pay. So I have decided to switch gears, and I didn't do this last night in Ventura, but from now on, starting tonight, I'm going to give you my top 10 reasons not to impeach Dick Cheney. And so here they are in reverse order. Number 10. If we just wait 9 more months, only a couple of more 100,000 Iraqis and some hundreds of U.S. troops will die. Not exactly big news. And what's 9 months anyway? Blink of an eye. The time somebody's pregnant. Number 9. In these next 9 months, we will probably only launch at most 1 more foreign war beyond the ones we're running now. It could expand, bring in other nations, and ultimately engulf the world, but it will only be a single additional war, which is hardly a significant change. Number 8, our ongoing actions in Iraq and around the world under the current administration might not provoke an attack in this country during the next 9 months, and if such a thing does happen, we wouldn't want a functioning democracy in place in Washington, and we certainly wouldn't want to prevent the same people who got us into the disaster from managing our efforts to make it worse. You don't change horses in the middle of an apocalypse. Number 7, even starting in 2009, we will still have several years left in which we can try to reverse global warming if we hurry. And won't it be more exciting if we procrastinate and then have to cram?
Yeah.
We might even force a real breakthrough and discover how to refreeze icebergs or how to re-evolve species. Plus that rap that Mars has gotten as a bad place to live is not exactly fair, I think. Number 6. The millions of American families about to lose their homes to foreclosures will only have 1 winter to brave, and it may be an especially warm one. Number 5, right around the corner, a mere 7 months away, a completely unreliable and probably fraudulent election will give us a new president and vice president. Number 4, if we're lucky, the new president won't be a crazy old senator who wants to stay in Iraq for 10,000 more years. We might get an inspiring young senator who refuses to say how long he wants to try to keep us in Iraq. Number 3, if we're really lucky, future presidents and vice presidents will go ahead and obey laws even though that won't be required anymore. Number 2, during the impeachment hearings, it would be very difficult to prove that Dick Cheney had sex with someone. And the number 1 reason not to bother impeaching Dick Cheney, George W. Bush could become president. Our First Amendment has been locked up in a chain-link free speech zone. Our 4th Amendment is under warrantless surveillance and scared for its life. Our 5th, 6th, and 7th Amendments have been detained without charge. The 8th Amendment is presently undergoing waterboarding. Restoring our Bill of Rights is a positive step. It's not personal, it's not revengeful, it's not backward-looking. This is why we need impeachment. An election might, if we're lucky, get us a president who upholds the Bill of Rights. But what about the next 10 presidents? Will they all remain completely uncorrupted by the knowledge that Bush and Cheney paid no price for violating our civil rights? It is much more likely that one of them will push even further in the direction of tyranny. Now, while I consider impeaching Bush and Cheney more important than an election, even if it is the 5th consecutive most important election of your lifetime, I have grown tired of hearing misinformed nonsense about how impeachment would hurt the Democrats in an election. That's what they said when they refused to impeach Reagan for Iran-Contra. They proceeded to lose the elections. When they went after Nixon, they won. When the Republicans went after Truman, they won. When the Republicans tried to impeach Bill Clinton against the will of a huge majority of the public, they held both houses of Congress and took the White House, losing a few seats in the Senate which had acquitted. Some of the impeachment leaders in the House won with bigger margins than before, and Al Gore was put on the defensive to such an extent that he chose impeachment advocate Joe Lieberman as his running mate and pretended he had never met Bill Clinton. When the Whigs attempted to impeach Tyler, they won 7 seats and Tyler left politics. Weeks after he lobbied successfully to impeach Johnson, Ulysses Grant was nominated for the presidency. After pushing toward an impeachment for Polk, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. Keith Ellison, who introduced a resolution to impeach Bush and Cheney in the Minnesota legislature in 2006, was immediately elected to Congress. Impeachment hearings on torture and signing statements would be deadly for John McCain's campaign. Can you imagine McCain defending crime after crime while promising not to commit them and explaining his past flip-flops? You wouldn't even have to get to an impeachment vote. Just hold the impeachment hearings. John Conyers' latest excuse for not moving forward on impeachment hearings is that it might hurt Obama's campaign. Obama was asked recently in Philadelphia about impeachment, indictment, and accountability for Bush and Cheney. He suggested that he might investigate their crimes after we elect him president, and he might prosecute them if they were found to have committed any crimes. If. This should be as famous as Dick Cheney's "so." At every stop Obama makes on this endless campaign, people should hand him copies of a book by John Conyers called The Constitution in Crisis. You can get it at most bookstores. You can get it at Amazon.com. It documents a list of Bush and Cheney's felonies and impeachable offenses. Yes, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee is selling books on the impeachment of Bush and Cheney and refusing to impeach them. Does Obama disagree with the book's conclusions? Does he have a response to Bush's public confession to violating the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act? Does he question the 2 Government Accountability Office studies that have found that in a significant percentage of cases, when Bush writes a signing statement declaring he has the right to violate laws, he proceeds to violate those laws? Does Obama now believe that the invasion of Iraq and everything that came with it may have been legal? Was the February 7th, 2002 order from Bush allowing the torture of detainees a legal act? If Obama were to quietly allow impeachment hearings on Cheney or Bush to proceed, he would put McCain on the defensive. Impeachment hearings could squeeze out all the nonsense pseudo-issues. And if the American public understood that voting for Obama would put Bush and Cheney behind bars, and understood it while there's time to register new voters, you would see a landslide. If your Congress member, perhaps Lois Capps, for example, refuses to see the electoral advantage of impeachment, ask her this: is there anything at all for which you would risk losing an election? If so, what in the world can it be? If not, you are in principle expressing a willingness to support up to 2 years of mass murder, and not just in principle. Okay, but isn't it too late for impeachment? Well, the movements to impeach Truman and Hoover and the impeachment of Johnson happened later than where we are now. And there is nothing else for Congress to do during the next 9 months, or during the past year and a half. Ending the occupation requires not doing something. On all other issues, every good bill has been and will be vetoed, every mixed bill will be signing statemented, and every horrendous bill will become law. And every non-impeachment investigation either displays the evidence and doesn't act on it, or gets stonewalled with denials of requests and subpoenas and even contempt citations. Nancy Pelosi and John Murtha are gung-ho to fund another 1.5 years of occupying Iraq. At least that's what their actions suggest as they rush a bill to the floor. But you get an entirely different idea if you listen to what they say. On February 7th of this year, Murtha released a statement denouncing the funding of the occupation in the harshest terms. Quote, "We are familiar with the visible costs associated with the war in Iraq and the sacrifices that our men and women in uniform and their families are making. We are less familiar with the hidden costs associated with the war in Iraq, and these will have long-term consequences. Every penny of the $535 billion, this is obviously out of date, appropriated thus far has been borrowed. This doesn't even include over $300 billion for the rest of 08 and 09. I've been saying for years that you can't fight an endless war and cut taxes. You can't put $1 trillion war on a credit card and leave the bills for our children to pay. The same Americans sacrificing in Iraq today will be paying for this borrowed war for the rest of their lives. Since the Iraq War began, the international credibility and respect of the United States has plummeted while instability has grown throughout the region. This administration borrows $343 million every day to finance the war in Iraq and continues to shortchange our domestic needs. We must restore fiscal sanity, and that begins by using the $343 million we are spending every day in Iraq and putting it to use here at home. 4.5 weeks in Iraq could double the funding NIH spends on cancer research every year. Over 1,500 Americans die every day from cancer. 18 months in Iraq could repair the 70,000 plus structurally deficient bridges across America. And he goes on and on and on and on. In all my 35 years in Congress, Murtha concluded, I have never seen a major problem or challenge that hasn't been solved in a bipartisan manner. Our next president and the American people must understand that it will require tremendous resources and strong bipartisan and international cooperation to begin to solve these challenges. The future of our great country depends on it. The next president. How did we get to the next president? How did the year from these remarks to the inauguration of the next president cease to exist? Along with Murtha's actions this week, as he rushes $172 billion to the floor with no committee hearing. The Senate and the House have been in the hands of Democrats for the worst of the occupation, which has occurred since January '07. The one thing we know about Iraq is that each year is worse than the one before it. At least 80% of Iraqis have always said that violence would go down if the United States got out. And here Bush and Cheney are not alone in their arrogance. A great many Americans assume that the Iraqis must be wrong about their own country. And why? Well, because the same lying chicken hawks who told us about the stockpiles of WMDs and ties to 9/11 and robot planes attacking us in 45 minutes and risks of mushroom clouds say the Iraqis are wrong. Who are you going to believe? The people who live there, or the people whose own defense is that they have accidentally gotten everything catastrophically wrong so far? Our representatives in Congress and our candidates for president are so opposed to the occupation of Iraq that rather than funding a withdrawal, they are now proposing to fund the continuation of the occupation as is for the rest of Bush and Cheney's terms plus a big chunk of the next administration and Congress. So this started me thinking about some of the things I strongly oppose and how I could better express my opposition. I've decided, in fact, to get a new mortgage on all the equity we've got in our house and at the same time to max out 3 credit cards. I'm going to take all the money and donate it in equal shares to Exxon, Halliburton, Blackwater, and 4 different health insurance corporations. Already I feel so much better. I may not have put an end to Exxon, but I have expressed my opposition to it in the clearest possible terms by ruining my family for generations in order to give Exxon money. That ought to be worth something in my next campaign for a head of household. And in case I decide to oppose anything else in the future, I'm looking into the possibility of stealing a huge amount of money from a charity in my home. The genius of our congressional leaders has inspired me. I wonder if you can truly grasp the complexity of their latest maneuver. Not only can they guarantee the funding of more slaughter for more months, not only can they move the goalposts so that defunding the occupation and voting no and filibustering is completely off the playing field, not only can they kiss up to the television networks and war profiteers in such an abject manner that they are guaranteed another masochistically thrilling ass-kicking, but, and this is the true genius of this move, they can boost the plausibility of an election theft by an insane senator from Arizona who will fund the occupation for 10,000 years without himself even realizing that he opposes it. This is genius. And yet, there remains this fringe left-wing moonbat group consisting of about 80% of Americans who oppose the occupation of Iraq in the ordinary sense of not wanting to throw trillions of dollars at it.